about fraudulence, in particular with e-commerce, and my focus is on building practical tools for alleviation. So first I'm going to give a little bit of background so we're all on the same page, and then I'll get started with the presentation. So what is peer-to-peer e-commerce? We can define a peer-to-peer network as a decentralized network in which the nodes are both suppliers and consumers of resources. However, when we're talking about a human network, we're typically talking about a social network or some sort of e-commerce network. And this is typically called a consumer-to-consumer network, in which humans are being both the buyers and sellers. And we're all pretty familiar with this with eBay, Craigslist, Amazon. In particular, I'm using eBay and Craigslist in this study. So what type of fraudulence are we dealing with? In particular, I'm dealing with buyer fraudulence as opposed to seller fraudulence. And I define buyer fraudulence as a buyer trying to fraud a seller or scam them to ship them something without paying. And seller fraudulence is just the opposite. I chose this for two reasons. First, buyer fraudulence is not often studied in academia, and this is simply because platforms already give a lot of protection to sellers, not so much to buyers. So many people choose to study seller fraudulence. Despite this, there's a ton of holes in all these platforms in scamming sellers. So I wanted to point out those flaws. And then it's really expensive to do a survey on seller fraudulence. You literally would have to get a pile of cash and just start buying stuff. And this was a little bit easier because I could just get items and sell them and not have some huge amount of cash to spend. In particular, I'm looking for email spoofs. These email spoofs can be either fake PayPal, fake eBay, fake bank or wire transfer emails. And then I'm looking for stories through email or text message. I define these stories as just the way the scam artist is persuading you to ship the item. And you'll get a little better feel of that throughout the presentation. So, most important slide, why does this matter to you? Why are you sitting here watching this? Number one, e-commerce auction scams. They claimed a top spot in the Wall Street Journal's top 10 biggest scams of 2013 list. So this is a relevant problem. This is not something that's old hat, even though e-commerce has been around since the late 90s. Despite this, users have been frustrated with fraud on eBay and Craigslist since its inception in the late 90s. Yet very little has changed. You can do a quick Google search, you'll find the top 50 results are people complaining on their blogs, hey, I got frauded, don't do this, I got scammed. Articles on how to avoid fraud. There's even a whole website dedicated to PayPal horror stories and eBay horror stories. And if you look at the who is of the website, you see it was created in 2007 and was updated as late as 2013. If you scroll through that list, you'll find stories from 03 and 04. So it's been happening since its inception and still happening. And you're like, okay, that's cool, but it's not going to happen to me. I'm smart enough. I get it. But it could be you. You may be not on the top of your game, and you may get fooled by one of these great spoofs of an eBay email. This one in particular being when I tried to sell the iMac in this study. But this is not to say eBay hasn't tried. It's not like eBay is a terrible company and they're doing a bad job. They actually have one of the most robust reputation and feedback systems. This is one of the only ways we can quantify human behaviors by giving feedback from other peers and then giving them some type of score. This is very similar to our credit score system. But as you know, credit score system and the feedback system all have their flaws. It's not necessarily the best way to go about it, but it's the best way that we put into practicality. They've established a trust and safety department. They've done awareness initiatives, told people what to look out for. They've even given out awards to top-rated sellers to keep legitimate people in the system. They do constant revisions on policies and user agreements. You'll get emails all the time from them saying they've revised it. And they even delay you getting your money if you sell something until the transaction's gone all the way through. Yet, people are still complaining. So what has been proposed? Tons of things. Anomaly detection schemes, data mining schemes, agent-based trust management schemes, social network analysis and tree classification schemes, even additions to this already robust reputation system, but they're all just conceptually formalized. So they're just models in an academic paper somewhere, and some of them really great models, but none of them came to fruition. So based on this, I propose two questions. First, what are the common traits of typical buyer fraudulence? And can a simple third-party tool be built to alleviate this common buyer fraudulence based on the data? Keeping in mind that the goal is to build some type of practical tool that actually stops something. My methodologies to answer these questions is first a selling that went for 9 weeks, and I collected data on that selling. This could be any item from any category, whether it's electronic, household item, musical item, whatever. I would take it and I would sell it. And the price range could be anything from $10 to $45,000. It didn't matter. From there, I did a specific 1-week selling test based on the data from the 9-week selling test. and you'll get a better feel of this when I do the findings. And then a very heavy literature review to see what data has been collected. A lot of people have done 2 to 3 year studies doing the very similar thing, just selling things. So they had a lot more data than I did. And I compared that data and put it together to build a tool based on all of it, so we have a really robust amount of data to work with. So salient findings, first the 9-week test. Correlations are really hard to find in this. So I thought I'd get tons of great data, and that was hard to do. So if you just take a bivariate correlation of everything I add, there's no correlation at all between the fraud count and price listed, and it's possibly because there's a $45,000 airplane right there that just throws off everything. And then there's an iPad up here that for some reason some guy really wanted and tried to fraud it about 5 times. And so you're like, okay, we'll cut the outliers, we'll try it again, and you keep cutting the outliers, and there's not really any correlations. This correlation gets a little bit stronger, but at that point you're really just manipulating data, and that's not showing much. So I decided to look somewhere else. So I looked at the actual what items were frauded on, and over 86% of them were electronics. And this is significant because there's actually a fairly even distribution between the categories of items. So it wasn't as though I had 90% electronics, so most of them were electronics. There's actually a pretty good distribution. So I decided to do that exact same bivariate correlation between the fraud count and the price listed, but I did it only on electronics. And we actually have a significant correlation, seeing a regression equation there. So this is showing that there is a possible chance that if electronics are higher priced, there's more fraud on them, which makes sense, and it's also actually consistent with some other literature, which proved that at least my data did something. So based on this, I did a 1-week sewing test. And so we have electronics, and if they're higher priced, they're probably going to get more fraud according to this correlation. So I listed a 2011 Apple iMac, but I listed it for double the price because I didn't really want to sell it. So I was like, if someone's going to buy it, I at least can get another one myself. But this was actually a great idea because the Apple iMac was more expensive in terms of electronics in my data. It was more expensive than by far. And it received 4 fraud hits in 1 week. And this is significant because it actually takes some time to relist this iMac because it's so expensive. You actually have to call eBay, tell them you're relisting it, and then someone tries to scam you, and they go through all this stuff. So it could take up to a day to relist, sometimes less if I was really on my game. So every single time it was relisted, it got a fraud hit except for that very last time. And so that at least proves that that correlation may be correct. And then here's some of the fake PayPals I got from this specific 1-week test. This one's a little bit cluttered, but many people who are not familiar with the system would be fooled. Here's a little bit better one from that same person. And then here's a eBay invoice that's fake. And there's a nice user story up there that we'll discuss a little bit later. And then this is a word cloud of all the keywords, not all the keywords, actually just a few of the keywords that were common of people trying to tell you, hey, should be the item. So you can see there's a consistent story here. It's somebody's birthday, and that's either your nephew, your son, your daughter, your niece, and they happen to be in Nigeria. Don't know why they're in Nigeria, but they're in Nigeria, and it's urgent. So it's their birthday, it's urgent, I want to get them a present. So I've already sent you the payment, it's in the pending section on PayPal. You probably don't see it, but don't worry, if you ship it to me in 24 hours, you'll see that money come in. And if you don't know the system, you're going to just ship out the item hoping to get your money, because many times they actually offer you more money as some type of incentive. And so this is actually, there's a lot more stories I got. This one was about 90% of the stories I got were this exact same story, replaced son with daughter, nephew, and it's the exact same. And this is actually consistent with some other literature that got the exact same scam. So I don't know if a group of guys decided to do one thing and never change it up, but that was the majority of the stories. So based on all of this, I built Fraud Finder. And Fraud Finder is a web application that checks peer-to-peer e-commerce transactions for fraudulent behavior and is built with the end user's mind. So once again, this has got to be practical, something that someone can just quickly copy and paste something into and get some type of output of how I should deal with this transaction. And I used all of these languages to create it. Really, PHP did the bulk of the work. All of these were to make it look good. I shout out the :jQuery was really easy to use, and it made it look really good, which you'll see in a second. So how does Fraud Finder find fraud? I probably shouldn't have done that title. So it checks full email headers, email bodies, and text messages. And then it checks some additional information about the transaction, such as what was the price they offered you as compared to the price you listed, and did they want international shipping, was it an electronic, music item, any of the categories. So the full email header is really simple. This was the one I started out with because I was thinking, well, if I'm going to look through a full email header, all I have to do is check the return path and see if that matches with the half email header, I guess you'll call it, or the one that can be easily spoofed. So we just parse the input, find that return path, and then we compare the return path to a list of good domains. By default, I have PayPal and eBay as the good domains, but there's a nice little feature where you can add your bank's domain if it happens to be a fake email, and it will compare that and add that to the list. So really it can check any email if it's been spoofed just by checking the full header. And then email body and text messages, this is relying on those user stories. And there's a lot of ways I could have done this, and this may not have been the best way, but I'll discuss that a little bit later. First, based on the keywords that I showed you, so I searched through the parsed input for common keywords. We give an even distribution on weight initially, and then we give a little bit more weight to the words that are just giveaway words. And then phrases are the same way, except for I have to do a little bit of different manipulation with the arrays. But it's the same way, and they're all evenly distributed because no phrase seemed to be more significant than the other. And then this part I added just like 2 days ago. And I call it haste words. And this is based on the bag of words model that I discussed with Dr. Kirk exactly a week ago. This is not a full implementation, but the algorithm checks for duplicate words, and that was not supposed to happen. It checks for duplicate words. Not all words matter for duplicate. If I put Nigeria 20 times in my document, I may actually be talking about Nigeria and not trying to get you to ship it there. So that doesn't make it 20 times more relevant. However, there are some words that make it relevant, such as urgent or ship now. But once again, it's not proportional. It's not to say that if it says urgent 10 times, this is 10 times more fraudulent. So I listened to a couple different lectures on the bag of words model and how they did their duplicates. And they increment it by a log rather than just some linear function. And I somehow came up with the log base 3 of the frequency plus 1. This was messing around in Wolfram Alpha for a little bit to make the curve exactly right. So then that means that as you get more words, it's not incrementing by 1, it's incrementing by that function. And this actually works pretty well, and I'll show you this in the demo. And then we'll get to future works. So this is Fraud Finder. It's a little bit stretched out because of this projector, but as you see, jQuery did all this beautiful background. The background can stretch to different lengths because of jQuery. So you see it's kind of pseudo responsive due to jQuery. Simple web page, about page, and all of that. But here is the email body. So here's some questions, what type of item it was, and the prices, international shipping, and then you just simply copy and paste your email body here. So I will grab some emails. In particular, I'll just grab the first one. I don't know if it's fake or real. And we'll grab the body of it, copy it just as the directions have told me to. I'm going to paste it in there. In this case, let's see, the item was an electronic, but they didn't ask for international shipping. And I can omit the price. That does add a factor, but you don't necessarily have to put it. And we get a very low chance of fraud. So we're like, okay, this is probably not fraudulent. However, with checking the email body, it's possible that if it's a fraud eBay email or something of that sort, that we need to check the full header. So it gives you directions down here saying, even though it's not fraudulent, it doesn't seem fraudulent from the email body, you may want to check the header, because there's not going to be a lot of text if I'm faking a PayPal email. So we go over to the header checker. Okay, well, I'm using Yahoo, so I check how I get the header in Yahoo, and I go over here and grab the full email header. And I simply copy and paste it. And as you can see, there's also this space here if I wanted to add a new domain, such as my bank's email address or something of that sort. I submit it, and the header looks good. This is actually from PayPal. So great, we can go through the transaction. However, if you go back and we want to try maybe a different email that's actually fraudulent, and let's go back to presentation emails. I know that this one's probably fraudulent. Indeed it is. And so we'll check this one. This one actually is a fake invoice with a little message from the user. We'll go to the email body. And in this case, let's see, it was an electronic. This was the Apple iMac, so electronic. They actually offer you more for the price, but I'll admit that right now. Well, actually, we can put it. It's no big deal. It adds a little bit more to the score, but it's not significant. So they offered me $4,000. I was selling for $3,000. and they did ask for international shipping. And so we get the exact opposite end. It's a very high chance of fraud. So we can go back and we can do the same thing with text message. It operates exactly the same way as email body. So overall, it has 4 categories. It has very low, low to medium, high, and very high. And each of them gives you different directions based on that output of how to deal with that transaction. And so, go back over here to future work. The biggest thing in future work is the full implementation of Bag of Words. So the Bag of Words is a model in natural language processing that's fairly common that I didn't know about until exactly a week ago. So I didn't get a chance to implement it. However, that's where the duplicate analogy comes from. And if I was to fully implement this, I can go more than 4 categories. So now it's a little bit broad. So there's a little bit of leeway room for accuracy. However, if I can move to Bag of Words, I can probably get down to like a percentage, so it's much more accurate. And then I would like to also add a fully responsive design. That was just something on the back burner because I thought the algorithm's accuracy was more important. And then also just continue testing and updating it with new stories for the scams and things like that, which that would just require continued testing. So, any questions? Dave.
So is Fraud Finder like an email that everyone, I mean not an email, a web address people can go to now?
Yes, it is. It is actually at p2pfraudfinder.com, omitting the E and the ER. And so it's up and ready to go.
How long do you plan on keeping it up?
As long as I can, I guess, update it. Because eventually I think it would probably get out of date, but I would like to keep it updated. And I even have a downloads page to maybe add some more tools, but I'm not too sure yet. So.
Can you comment on your inspirations for the user interface?
For the user interface? Well, I really always wanted to make a website with a huge background. That was the initial point. So I was like, I want to make a huge, background website. But then I wanted to make it look, criminal-esque, I guess you could say. And that's what the black and white cityscape is for. But overall, I think aesthetics are 3/4 of the battle. No one's going to come to your website if it's just text anymore. So I wanted to make it look good.
I haven't done as much research in this area, but I know a lot of those Nigerian scams that, for example, I'm stuck in New York and help me out and suppose it comes from a friend. Sometimes you can tell because of the poor English. Is that something that you've considered using?
Definitely. That was the first consideration. And so initially I was actually not building a web app, I was building a email filter for Gmail that you could add on. But apparently you need corporate servers to do that, so I had to trash that about halfway through. And so I didn't get much of a chance to try to implement it, but I wanted to use some type of natural language processing to check grammar. But when I was looking at a couple lectures on Bag of Words model, there's actually ways to do that better in that model. So in that full implementation, they'll probably check for grammar. You're right, that's actually the big giveaway. Steven.
This may be a kind of like long and drawn out question, but so you said that a lot of these people ask for international shipping. Does that mean like a lot of these scammers were like internationally based?
Yeah, 100% of them wanted to ship international, which is consistent with a lot of the literature. And that's not a heavy weight asking that. It's actually a very small weight because it's not like you can just block out the rest of the world and say, I only ship in the US. It really is only weighted to certain areas.
Okay. And then also, do you think that like it's a certain community of people that try and enact this like buyer fraud, or do you think like there's tutorials out there like the same way Al learned a Blender, there's like a Blender community, there's like a buyer scamming community? Do you think there is something like that?
Interestingly enough, there's both. So there actually is tutorials on how to spoof emails and how to do this exact same thing. You can just Google it, it's top results. I found a couple of them and did some tests with my own fakes against my fraud finder. And so it's pretty easy to do. The reason for the consistency on the story, I have no idea. Some of the other literature was saying that it was some type of gang-related thing, but I highly doubt it, really. I don't know if that's at all organized crime. Someone somewhere is saying, hey, here's a story that works, and they obviously get good results because they keep using it. So.
Okay. And then last question. Do you have you heard any stories about like prosecution regarding buyer fraud? Like the law trying to intervene and actually stop the people who are enacting this, or is it their trouble with that because a lot of them are international, like it goes beyond the bounds of the U.S. justice system?
Yeah, I mean, people definitely try to report it. I think people report buyer fraud less because they're embarrassed. Because on the opposite end, like if I'm trying to buy something, it's like, I didn't know this was going to be fraud. This is very clearly, just buying something. But if you ship someone your item willingly, then you're embarrassed and no one reports it. So there's actually not much data in terms of law enforcement on that. But it would be really, there's a lot of anonymity and, the same thing, country borders, so I'm sure that there's not much data on it. Cool.
Have you considered anything like a liability agreement? Because what if somebody came to you?
Yes, that's a great point. Here's a wonderful disclaimer so I don't get sued. Yeah. No, I thought about that exactly when I put it up. I was like, wait a second, what if it doesn't work in one case and some guy gets scammed? So yeah, that's some legal jargon to cover me. So good question though. I mean, any more questions? Dr. Lee.
So, which web hosting company are you using?
Just one question. So
Story behind it.
I was trying to be cheap and I used the 000 web hosting, which I've used in the past and have done pretty well for free web hosting. And so they've been pretty well, except for they have a couple pop-ups every once in a while. However, last night at like probably 1 a.m., the website was down, and that was because they were getting a DDoS attack on their free servers, which I'm not sure why. So luckily it is up right now, but it was not up as of this morning. So there's some risk there, but it's just a free web hosting site. So the domain I bought, but other than that.
People get DDoS all the time. Right?
Yeah, I think it was TJ, but I don't know.
Do you report the people?
No, because I didn't really know how to report them. I mean, I actually looked some of that up, and people can report them to eBay, but eBay kind of just brushes it on the rug, like, hey, we have some blogs that tell you how to avoid that. Nothing we can do about it. So I didn't really report them. I just took as much data as I can, kind of played along for a little bit, acted like I shipped it to them, and see how much I could get from them. And then just never gave them out, and they just never talked to me again. So. High risk again. I made sure my email wasn't like my personal email. I wasn't trying that, but
Yeah.
Any other questions?